Martinez completely disregarded his own safety and saved another man's life. And I have no doubt in my mind that if he didn't intervene, Brent Hames would have been killed.
I'm Martinez.
It was April 6th of last year at the Boulevard Bar in San Diego. He wasn't working on that night. He was just actually a participant in the pool tournament they're having.
I was just hanging out playing pool, and then see two guys arguing. I don't like fighting in the bar, so I went and tried breaking it up. Didn't realize it was going to get that bad.
At one point, the defendant, and who's a big guy, by the way.
They're bigger dudes. They're each about 6 foot. I'm 5'5", so yeah, I'm not really that tall.
He smashes this other gentleman over the head with a cane a few times, actually breaking it. Martinez steps between these two people and kind of separates them out, pushes them apart.
One of them's just drunk, standing there, like grabbing his head because he just got hit with a cane. And then the other one was about to go in and try stabbing him with the broken end of the cane. And that's when I put him up against the wall to try stopping it.
He's able to disarm him.
And then he reached down and out of his off his leg and pulled out like an 8-inch knife.
And he stabbed the first victim, Brent Hames, in the abdomen. Now, it was an 8-inch laceration to the left side of Mr. Hames' abdomen. The defendant had pulled the knife back again and was going in for a second stab on Mr. Hames.
He went in for a second stab, and I grabbed him.
When Martinez jumped back in the middle.
I was just trying to, stop it from getting worse.
Pulling him down on the ground, throwing him down on the ground, and getting stabbed himself in the process.
We both fell on the ground, and he turned and looked at me and just like sliced at me.
About a 9-centimeter laceration, 4 centimeters deep into his right thigh. Missed his femoral artery by millimeters.
I didn't realize I was cut that bad until I actually looked at it, and my leg was like filleted open.
He was very close to bleeding out and dying right there on the floor of that bar.
I was kneeling on top of his arm until another customer that was there was able to get the knife out of his hand. And then after that, they put me down on the ground and put a belt around my leg. That's when people started finally helping out.
It can be very difficult in cases to face down the person that victimized you, that assaulted you, that basically almost killed you.
Never actually been in a courtroom, so I've never been on the stand before or anything like that.
He kind of put his emotions to the side and he did the right thing. He did what he needed to do.
The guy was giving me an evil eye across, the courtroom.
The defendant was convicted of all charges and was sentenced to state prison. I wanted Cress to get the award because he's so modest and he's so humble.
It's just the way I was raised. I was raised by my grandma, so kind of old school. I don't see the problem getting hurt trying to save someone, so.
In intervening, he almost lost his life as well. He almost bled to death on the floor of that bar. And I think he deserves to be recognized for that.
I would probably still do the same thing today.
I've prosecuted thousands of cases, and I can honestly say that he's one of the bravest people I've ever come across.
I'm Martinez, and I'm a citizen of courage.
When I first read this police report, I have to say my initial thought was, who is this man? This is pretty risky. It's so unusual, it's refreshing, it's courageous. When you take the seriousness out of this, it's actually quite a funny story.
My name is Jim St Pierre. It was a nice sunny day, and all of a sudden a car drove up. I noticed it stopped in front of the neighbor's house, walked right straight to the side gate, and I thought that was kind of strange. He drives away and the girl goes in the side gate. Really strange. Car comes back. I thought, that's really strange. So I took my iPhone and walked out in the street and held it up. I was going to take a picture of the car, but the car started up and backed up and took off. Oh, so now I know something's going on. I think I'll call 911. All of a sudden, the two girls pop out of the side of the house carrying baggage.
These perpetrators, went into a home on his neighborhood, on his block, and he took action to protect.
Well, I'll just jump in a car and took a camera and flipped a few pictures when they were walking.
He jumped in his truck and he drove alongside them and wanted to make sure they didn't get away.
So I just drove up and said, "Hey girls, what you doing? Hey, kind of hot day to be carrying all these bags."
They gave him a line, such as, "Hey, we need to go find our boyfriends or something. We need to be taken to the 7-Eleven.
Sure, jump in.
Silly for them, they did it.
They got in the car with all their loot, and so I thought, "Oh, now what am I going to do? Take them down to the 7-Eleven and turn them loose? No. Am I going to arrest them? No." So the obvious thing was drop them off at the police station.
In my almost 17 years, I've never seen anything like this.
They didn't know where I was going, but when I came to a screeching halt in front of the police station.
Of course, they bolted out of the car and they were found close by with the loot, red-handed.
Oh man, they started cussing. I was not their friend no more.
The pictures that Mr. St. Pierre took were very important. They helped us identify them. They helped other neighbors in photographic lineups. So they were extremely important to identifying the two females who did this crime. Because of the efforts of Mr. St. Pierre, we were able to find thousands of lost items that were able to be returned to their owners. World War II firearms, precious jewelry that grandmothers had given, things that might not mean anything to the actual perpetrators, but mean everything to the victims. We were able to apprehend and catch 2 residential burglars. They both pled guilty to strikes, multiple strikes, and they're now serving time in the state prison. We've got an open case now on the male. We're able to make sure that he is also held accountable.
When you observe a crime right in front of your eyes, what are you going to do, hide?
People would rather just forget about picking up the phone. They'd rather close their windows. They'd rather just say, "It's not my business."
It was my problem, even though we weren't being burglarized. It was in the neighborhood, and we like to keep the neighborhood safe.
When I think of a citizen of courage in our cases, I think of somebody who did something extraordinary. He did that.
I get a kick out of it. This is probably the most fun I've had since I retired. I'm Jim St. Pierre, and I'm a citizen of courage.
I looked at this guy and I said, "We're going to lift this car off of this lady." And he kind of looked at me like, "This is not possible." And I said, "We're going to try." My name is Tim Ricker.
The driver, the defendant, and his friend were celebrating the Chargers game, winning a playoff game. And they were on their way home after celebrating for about 4 hours when they were driving erratically on the freeway.
At that time, a car passed, maybe doing 120 plus miles an hour.
And they rear-ended the Explorer, which is where Yini Jimenez was the passenger, causing the Explorer to hit the center divide, lose control, and start rolling over.
A short time later, I see all this debris, smoke, skid marks, everything. I was the first one on the scene.
Inside the Explorer was Vinicio Jimenez. He was the driver of the Explorer. In the front passenger seat was Yini Gonzalez, which was his wife, and they were high school sweethearts. In the back seat was their daughter, 5-year-old Ginny Gonzalez, and then 2 family friends, and they were on their way to LA to visit family.
911 emergency, what are you reporting?
There was a horrific accident on the 5 freeway. He passed me, and I was like, is that guy drunk driving?
His car was swerving.
And one car flipped over 3 or 4 times. The car's turned over. Someone might be in critical shape. There are a handful of people that stopped and are trying to help.
Tim was very helpful on the scene. He actually took action. The occupants of the Explorer were able to get out on their own with some help from other Good Samaritans, but Yini Gonzalez was trapped underneath the Explorer.
And at that point, I'm standing on top of the vehicle looking down through the driver's side window. All I saw was a belly in the passenger floor of the vehicle, the SUV.
So then he went in through the trunk and crawled to the front.
And I can't get myself positioned to see if I have a pulse. All I can just see is this big belly, which really that's when things hit me. Like, this is, someone's trapped under this vehicle.
So Yini Gonzalez was 6 months pregnant with a baby girl, and they had already named her Leah.
That's when I kind of said, the best option here is to get this vehicle off this person immediately. I basically knew that if we lifted the car, we couldn't stop lifting because we would be setting the car back down on her. We went to lift the car, and another guy who's in the military is about my size, you know, we're not both big guys. And I said, start lifting on count of 3 and don't stop lifting until we get it off her. And so we started lifting. We were making progress, but we went through this transition spot where, you know, you've got to switch from here to here. There was a few seconds there where we looked at each other, and that's when the adrenaline kicked in, and we were able to just make it happen.
Once the Explorer was put back on its wheels, Tim went and reached for a pulse, and he couldn't find one.
Turned her head over and, you know, felt for a pulse, didn't have a pulse.
Once they realized what the defendant had done, the defendant fled on foot and just left her there for dead.
It did affect me for some time. I, you know, a short time later went to my girlfriend's house and just kind of broke down.
Tim was a great witness. He was very powerful. He was very descriptive, emotional. I mean, his testimony brought the jurors to the scene. The jury found him guilty of gross vehicular manslaughter and hit and run, and he was sentenced to state prison.
It allowed me to step back and look at things from a different perspective. A short time later, I realized, you know, if you really are passionate about this, you can take the next step and create a new service market.
I was very happy to learn that Tim was affected in such a way. I learned about it just by seeing the news.
A new business in the North County is using electric motorcycles like this one to help people get home safely after a night of drinking and help prevent tragedies.
Timothy Ricker quit his job in the hotel industry to start up his own green transportation service called Round Trip 101.
Round Trip 101. I started the business in August last year. Definitely have met a lot of great people. We encourage people to go out and have a good time. We just encourage them to do it in a responsible way.
Ricker says he was inspired to provide this service after witnessing a hit-and-run crash that claimed the lives of a pregnant woman and her unborn child. Ricker says he hopes to be able to prevent tragedies like this.
And just to see what he had done, sort of like a pay it forward to make sure that no other person gets hurt because of drunk driving, makes me really proud of him.
My name is Tim Ricker, and I am a citizen of courage.
And the 7-year-old Osvi, the story of what he did in covering his niece became well known within the community, and he became something of a, a hero, of a legend.
My name is Osvi Harris.
There was a church service that was going on to celebrate New Year's. At that service was Carol Waits and Sharon Burton, Osvi, and his niece Janice. Osvi was 7 years old and his niece was 2. So on the way home from this midnight service, the group of 4 stopped by a convenience store in the Lincoln Park neighborhood to buy a fire log. What they didn't know is they're also driving right into the middle of an active gang war. And where they parked that car would become, both literally and symbolically, ground zero for this gang rivalry. A group of gang members in at least 2 carloads were setting out to commit a revenge murder for a murder that happened just 24 hours before. Just as Miss Waits returned to the car with the fire log, the gang members, at least 2 carloads of gang members, pulled in just next to the parking lot.
I heard the door close on the cars. And then it happened.
So as gang members fled the front of the store to get to their cars, they ran right across the path of the victim's car. One of the guns was an AK-47, and from that AK-47, about 30 rounds were fired into the Burton Waits car. Osvi was sitting in the back seat with his 2-year-old niece. He heard the gunshots when he was sitting in the back passenger seat, and he knew from his training from his parents that if you hear gunshots, you get down.
The first thing I was thinking was, to get down.
He got down, looked to his left, and saw that his little 2-year-old niece wasn't getting down. Osby then leaned over to his left, put his body over his niece, and pulled her forward.
Covered up her like this.
At the same time, another shooter is blasting a shotgun. Another is shooting a .45. You could hear holes being punched in the metal of the cars. You could hear the bullets slapping up against the walls. So after the gang members fired 40, 50, 60 rounds of ammunition in that parking lot, they drove away. The smoke cleared. Who were left in the parking lot began to surveil the scene.
You know, chaos, people running around, cars trying to leave.
Ms. Waits had run into the store where she was screaming for help, praying not to die, and she died in the store. They can hear the car horn blasting. They look in, they see that Miss Burton is dead, leaning on the horn of her car, and they hear a crying baby, and they look in the back seat and see in her car seat the 2-year-old Janice, crying, but apparently otherwise unharmed. But next to her, leaning over to his left towards the car seat, was the 7-year-old Osby in a pool of blood with his clothes soaking in blood.
I went around to check on him, leaned him forward and pulled up his shirt. He had been shot multiple times. It looked like he had multiple gunshot wounds.
Osby was shot at least 4 times by rounds from an AK-47, the same power of the gun that shot each woman 1 time and killed them.
Hit me on my leg, my arm, my stomach, and up here.
So I just yelled at the ambulance driver, hey, you gotta grab this kid and run or he's not gonna make it. So pretty much that's what they did. They came over, we scooped him, put him in the ambulance, and they left.
If Osby had been 10 minutes later, they wouldn't have been able to save him. He was 10 minutes away from not being with us here today. It's amazing that anyone lived. And even more amazing is that the people, the kids in the back seat lived while the adults in the front seat were both shot and killed, even though the bullets had to travel through the trunk, through the firewall, through the back seats, through the front seats. Not only did Osby save his niece's life, but he saved his own life by leaning over to the left. He would have been killed if he'd stayed seated where he was. It is the case, the shooting, the murders that defined gang violence in Southeast San Diego for a decade. We worked on the case, the police department, the district attorney's office, the FBI, starting minutes after the murder came in. We left no stone unturned to try to solve this case.
Today, we are announcing that the gunman responsible for the death of Carol Waits and Sharon Burton has been identified and indicted by a grand jury. The shooter who fired the fatal shots will now be held accountable for his crimes.
And Osby came to court. He sat in a witness box in the same room as the man accused of killing his aunt, killing her friend, and shooting him so horribly. And he showed great courage, great strength in doing that. The defendant was ultimately convicted. He will spend the rest of his life in prison. I nominated Osby because of his actions that night. At the San Diego Police Department, in the DA's gang unit, Osby's something of a legend and a hero. Every day he's reminded of the injuries to his leg and to his torso and the scars he bears for this and always will. Not only did Osby try to save her life, he probably did save her life, and he unquestionably saved his own life by leaning over to his right. And he's something, again, something of a legend within this community.
My name is Osby Harris. I'm a citizen of courage.